All right, let's do it.
Double kill. Triple kill. Overkill.
It's just raining corpses.
Hang on a minute, what's this comment? Play Spiritborn, you idiot. Barb is weak. Dead class. That's not true. Is it? Hang on. You can solo carry tier 4 bosses. Yeah, okay. And push up to pit 100. Got billions of DPS. Effectively can't die. Yeah, I got that. And you can farm pretty much all tier 4 content fast and easy. So if I take that 1 and I carry the 2 divided by the square root of pi, that equals...
Oh, is my class broke? Okay, so in all seriousness, maybe it's not as strong as the Spiritborn. The class is on a whole other level of broken. But what this build can do is cause enough damage to be completely illegible. It makes a really cool sound, and it is more than strong enough to absolutely stomp the entirety of all content in the game on Torment 4, including 4-man Uber bosses. And for those of you that are just absolutely twisted madmen that actually enjoy pushing the pit, you can expect to get at least over pit 100 on the high end with this build. Now, real quick, before we do jump into my build, don't forget that there is a plethora of fantastic builds over on the Mobalytics website done by more talented and, might I add, more handsome guide writers than myself. So if you want to check those out, check out the link in the description. Now, as we get into what the build is, I want to first cover how it works, and then we'll get into the gear, the skills, and the Paragon. The first thing to understand is the core mechanics of the build, what makes it actually work. The first is the mandatory third blade. This converts our weapon mastery skills into core skills, which we absolutely must have. This allows us to spam our mighty throw as long as we have enough fury to do so. And the next is the combat bash, which is this bash up here. Causes your next core or weapon mastery skill to overpower after critically striking 4 times with bash, and combining that with bash cleaves, which allows you to hit multiple enemies. And if you're hitting more than 4 enemies, 9 out of 10 times you're going to get an automatic overpower on your next weapon throw. And then lastly, there's a bit of a minor mechanic here, but definitely worth noting: the use of Yen's blessing. What this does is cast any skill that's a non-mobility or non-ultimate skill that's on cooldown every 8 seconds. We have set our build up so that that is only one skill on the bar that applies to, and that is our cry. The reason we do this is it permanently keeps it up as a 7.4% duration, and Yen's casts every 8 seconds. So there's only these very minor brief periods of time where it's not up, and this is a really cool tech. Actually, I really like this. And real quick, before I get into the meat and potatoes of the build, a big shout out to Beat Dropper and Everest for helping refine this build. Love you guys. Thank you. Mwah. Time to break down the skills then. Let's have a look. The first one here, we have combat bash. Of course, you're going to be starting all combat with a bash and then a mighty throw, then a bash and a mighty throw. You're going to alternate between those two to keep those overpowers coming. We have Warpath to take advantage of all of those overpowers by giving us a nice damage multi. Belligerence, much the same. This gives us a ton of extra damage for weaving in those basic skills. All of the standard defense stuff here that you usually see: imposing presence, martial figure. We've got Outbursts and Tough as Nails to apply thorns damage and bleeding to enemies. This just helps us tap into a couple of Paragon passives, which is really nice, and is a pretty low investment. We then also have Rallying Cry with this particular version of the build. The Unstoppable in the high tier content is extraordinarily powerful. You don't want to be getting knocked around all of the place, and also the resource regen doesn't hurt. We don't need the tankiness from the previous build. We are completely invincible. As long as we're attacking, we physically can't die. Like, it's just not something that can happen with this build. We have Booming Voice to extend the duration of the shout. This is really important to make sure that the uptime on the shouts is near 100%. Got 1 point into charge. I like to use this as a CC break. If you're doing lower tier content and want to travel a bit faster, then I think Leap was going to be a better choice for you. We have the Berserking passives here, DR into resource regen. Then over here, we have Pit Fighter into Slaying Strike. Fantastic for helping with killing really high tier bosses. Exposed vulnerability, this is our only source and only needed source of vulnerable, because every time our weapon throw deals damage, we are going to be making enemies vulnerable, and that's every other attack. So this is absolutely all we're going to need. Next, obviously, an absolutely crap ton of points into Mighty Throw, and here's where the build deviates from the previous version. We have Fighter's Mighty Throw, which is every time you weapon swap with Mighty Throw out, it will cause an additional pulse and generate barrier. This is the main difference between the two builds, but it does change a couple of downstream things. First, we need to be weapon swapping. So before, you just had everything tied to your two-handed mace, but now you're going to want to have Mighty Throw tied to your two-handed slashing weapon so that you are getting those weapon swaps off. These pulses hit like a goddamn truck, because as long as the initial hit overpowers, the pulses will then also overpower. And there's some other stuff in the gear that you need to do, which we'll get to in a second, to make sure that you're getting the most out of that damage. I am playing Steel Grasp with this build as well. When pushing the pit, Steel Grasp is almost a must-have to help gather up enemies, get 2 packs together and just blast them down all at once. It is a core skill, so you can basically spam it an unlimited amount of times, as long as you have enough fury. Finally, in this tree, we have the passives down here for Fortify. We got Thick Skin into Counter Offensive, gives us a really nice damage boost, that one. And then we're fortifying through Irrepressible. Every time we cast Mighty Throw, we're going to get 10% of our max life as Fortify. We're casting it a ton. So this is permanent Fortify. Really, really easy. Really, really simple. Down here, we are running Kota. We are going to get basically 100% uptime on Kota as well by using Eret's Bearing to reduce our cooldown, meaning that we get all of that additional damage and attack speed, as well as all of this additional fury from this particular role. Wrath of the Berserker does do more damage, but you can see it has a 60-second cooldown, as opposed to, like, you can get this down to like an 8-second cooldown. Worlds apart in terms of uptime, and the uptime is very, very important for this build. We are using heavy-handed and brute force to boost that overpower crit damage. No wallop, because we are using the two-handed slashing weapon as our primary DPS doer, so this wouldn't be getting any effect. And then we have Furious Impulse and Invigorating Fury for healing and fury generation. And of course, we are still using Unbridled Rage with this build. That is the best DPS key passive that we could use. Now we're going to get into the gear. First of all, most of this is pretty high-end gear again, and there are a couple of things that you will absolutely need to hit before you can swap to this version of the build. So I would recommend paying very close attention to some of the recommendations here. We do have Aerith Perdition, absolutely an insane item for DPS. As far as where you want to hit your Masterworks and Greater Affixes, core skills. I didn't. My Masterworking is abysmal, so please copy what's in the planner. Don't copy what you see in the video. Then we have Tyrael's Might for the meanwhile. Unfortunately, the Shroud of False Death is still disabled, so while we're using this, you'll want to go for the damage reduction as your Greater Affix and your Masterworking, but we will swap as soon as the Shroud is re-enabled. For your gloves, you're going to want strength, crit chance. You can run core ranks. That's probably going to be best. But if you hit max life or attack speed, that is not terrible like I have here. Now, what is really, really important with this build is that you absolutely have to hit at minimum a high roll double masterwork crit on the Mighty Throw pulse size. It is imperative that you get around about 40 to 45% minimum. 50 is like the ideal goal. That'll be a triple masterwork on a high roll. This is required in order to get this build up and running properly. Otherwise, your single target DPS will suck balls. And the reason that is because you need to have your Mighty Throw pulses overlap. So when you throw one out here, there we go. You want this middle part to be overlapping so that the enemy is getting hit by all 3 pulses. If you're not at that benchmark, then you're going to have trouble with some bosses. Like if they're smaller bosses, they just won't be getting hit by everything, and that's going to be a real issue for you. So that's the first thing you need before you swap to this version of Mighty Throw. Next, we have Eret's Bearing. Like I said, this is going to be your cooldown reduction for the Call of the Ancients ultimate. You want to try and masterwork that at least twice if you got a Greater Affix on it. You're aiming for around 80-90% if you can. And then your final piece of armor, Yen's Blessings. These are also really important. They allow us to do the one-shot tech. Without them, you're going to need a ton of cooldown reduction, which is going to be very hard without like changing a ton of the build. Luckily, these are not too hard to get. If you get a masterwork on resource regeneration, fantastic. All stats isn't too bad, but resource regen is definitely the one to go for. Then as far as gems go, definitely for your armor, have rubies in all of them. Keep the runes on the weapons because strength is far, far more valuable than overpower damage. It gives you multiplicative damage as well as armor, whereas overpower damage is just additive damage. Definitely worlds apart in value. So yeah, that's that. Now moving over to weapons, the first one here, we have Herculean Spectacle, and you're going to want to try and get as high a roll on this affix as possible. Strength, max life, vulnerable damage. You can use overpower or crit. I like vulnerable because it has the most uptime. Weapon mastery skill damage, as well as chance for Mighty Throw to deal double damage. You're going to want to try and get this Mighty Throw double damage chance as close to 100% as you can. That is the priority on the Masterworks. Greater affixes, strength is the priority, max life then, and then the third damage type, whatever you hit. As far as the runes go, we're going for, whoopsie daisy, we're going for POC and we're going for which is going to give us Barbarians a war cry every, what's this, 600% maximum fury, which is actually surprisingly easy for us to spend. You see on the bar there in the bottom left, you can see there's a shout just gone off now. Maybe not quite 100% uptime, but not too far off. I think maybe there's a couple of seconds between each one. So it's a pretty good combination to keep that buff up without actually having to have it, which is really, really nice. 15% damage, not complaining about that. Next, we have a Doombringer. Huge amount of HP, which scales our overpower damage, but also a butt ton of damage reduction as well, which is fantastic. For this one, greater affix is definitely going to want to be on max life. Same with masterworking. Get that max life up as much as you can. That is your priority. Third blade, we already know about this. This is core to the build. You absolutely must have one of these. For the priority, the legendary affix is the most important thing. The weapon mastery skill damage, you want that as close to 70% as you can find. For masterworking, greater affixes, hit all of that on the strength if you can. And then we are moving over to the final weapon here. Now, you want this to be a polearm. Polearm is going to be the highest DPS. Axe is fine. Sword is really suboptimal, but you definitely want to try and get a polearm where you can. For this one, you absolutely must get the bash cleaves on it. You can have it on the other weapon, doesn't matter. One of the two-handed weapons have to have bash cleave on it, or this build kind of doesn't work. Weapon mastery skill damage is a secondary, and again, the same priorities for main stats. Strength, max life, vulnerable, crit or overpower are fine. And the same with the greater affix. You want to try and hit this onto strength, with all of the masterworking hopefully being on strength as well. Now, you are going to want to try and get conceited on this weapon. And the runes, Lift Sal. This is just stand still for 2.4 seconds, get 20% max life for 6 seconds. Huge boost to our overpower damage, huge boost to our survivability. Just a really, really nice combination as well. Just a little bit more on why we use a polearm. A polearm gives us, first of all, 15% increased damage while healthy. We will never take damage, so that is basically damn near a permanent thing. And we can also use the Executioner glyph, which gives us a ton of extra damage while we're using a polearm. So this is a huge, huge multiplier. Also, I mean, the actual implicit is really good as well. Vulnerable damage is the most usable out of all of the weapon types now. Polearms are coming in pretty strong. Actually, real quick, while we're looking at it, the weapon technique is two-handed axe, obviously, because it's the 10% extra damage to vulnerable enemies. Still not getting around that. That's still a must pick. Now, I want to quickly just reiterate the weapon setup. You want two-handed mace for the bash, and you want the slashing weapon for mighty throw. It's very important that you do that. Now, moving over to the jewelry, we have the first ring here. As far as stats go for this one, strength, attack speed, critical strike chance, with the greater affix priority being on the critical strike chance. As far as the tempers go, you wouldn't want to use what I'm using here because this is not correct. You'd want resource regen plus weapon mastery. I have the cooldown reduction because I just couldn't get my masterworks right, so I'm just using this instead to get the cooldown for my ultimate. For the aspect, you're going to want to get anger management. This is how we're berserking. So this is the only source of berserking that we have. And it's basically up 100% of the time when we use it this way. So this is a fantastic aspect to use. And then we have, of course, Ring of Starless Skies. This is a huge damage boost and reduces the amount of fury that we're spending by a half. So very, very useful for being able to actually cast our skills non-stop. As far as the greater affix and the masterwork priority goes, core skills, Secondary is critical strike chance because we do want our crit chance to be as close to 100 as humanly possible. And then finally, I have a Banished Lord's Talisman, but this isn't actually what I would recommend. If you have one like this, fantastic. It's a pretty good item. But what you actually want is a legendary amulet with a aspect on it. You're going to use Inner Calm on that and probably have Limitless Rage over here on your gloves. The planner will reflect this, so if you're confused, just check the planner. It'll show you the right gear setup. But you want a legendary amulet with Masterworked, Greater Affix Strength, and then you're going to want double passive. So you want counter offensive and brute force or heavy-handed. And that's going to be absolutely god tier. Your tempers, you're going to want to put maybe some more mighty throw size there. That allows you to use some of your masterworks on other stats rather than it, because you can just get like 25 on each piece without having to masterwork it. That is a fantastic option. More size is better. And then finally, you're going to want to put some more resource regen on it as well. And again, if you want to see it, build planner down in the description. That will have everything in there. Let's quickly blast through the Paragon board, and then that will be the build covered. So on the first Paragon board, as you saw earlier, we are using Executioner. Nice legendary damage bonus. Huge bonus to using polearms. Very easy pick. Then going onto the Bone Breaker board. Great board. We don't actually want the legendary node here, but it has a lot of damage reduction in HP. We've got Wrath. Nice additive damage bonus, great legendary bonus. The crit damage scale is really high, and the extra fury does not hurt. This build is very thirsty. We are then moving on to the Decimator board, get that nice little bit of attack speed. We got Might in here, which gives us a huge bonus to all of the blue nodes in range, which helps us cap out our berserking damage for the next legendary node. We'll see that in a second. But also has a fantastic multi for two-handed weapons. Damage to healthy enemies, not so fantastic, but it is what it is. It's otherwise a really powerful node. Then moving on to the next board, we've got Blood Rage here. This is really important. You get 30% multiplicative damage so long as you have 300% damage while berserking. And don't forget that you can get a roll of it on like your ring or your gloves to help cap it out. You'll probably need at least one. And then that will give you that huge damage bonus. And no, you don't have to bleed enemies to get the damage bonus. Even though we do bleed enemies, that is a separate thing that just gives you berserking if you kill a bleeding enemy. Then in this one, we have Challenger. This is where you get the most strength nodes with the setup that we have. So we've popped it in there. The best glyph in the game, so you absolutely are going to have to use one of these. And yeah, just boosts all of the nodes in here really well. Then moving over to the final board, we have Decimator. Making enemies vulnerable and overpowering them gives you an additional 20% extra damage. That's massive, and we are doing that with practically every single attack. And then over here, we have Dominate. The reason we have Dominate is as a great additive damage bonus, but also just one of the highest legendary bonus scalings as well. Just a really nice pick for this build to really juice those mighty throw damages. But that is the build. Hopefully this video has helped you out. If you did like it, don't forget to give it a like and subscribe. Barb, not that bad. Honestly, not as bad as people are making it out to be. I'm having an absolute blast. I'm pushing, trying to see how far this build can go. If you want to check that out, a link to my stream is down in the description below as well. Appreciate you watching. I'll catch you on the next one. Love ya. Bye.